you can like combine other elements. I always thought that was cool because like you can go out on the internet and like download somebody else's model and like integrate that into your scene, and things like that are always so cool because you can like reference the community almost, right? Like there's that element to rendering, which is neat too. But I don't remember actually what my first one is. You're thinking yours was like a flashlight, you were
Mine
saying?
was a flashlight for sure. Yeah, this was before I got familiar with SolidWorks. I mean, I was in high school, and we had a little bit of 3D modeling, mostly some 2D CAD activities in this kind of pre-engineering class I was in.
Yeah.
But yeah, we went through some of the tutorials. It was a flashlight. You model up a cylinder, a cone, model them in a light source. But it took you through kind of that rendering phase. You apply some transparency on some objects.
Yeah.
I mean, I don't know. I didn't make it fancy at all. I was just going like, this was beginner steps.
Yep.
But what was so cool is like when you hit that render button, you see the light, you see it going through objects, you see it shining out of a flashlight as if it was a real flashlight. It's like, oh, there's that level of physics there that we can capture, and we can create amazing things. Now, that flashlight was not amazing. But it was an amazing experience.
Yeah. Yeah, I do feel like it's kind of cool. Like, I mean, obviously the light is the coolest thing. Definitely when you like get lighting right on something, or the first time you add a light to something and it like shines off, it's like, wow, this is not CAD anymore. This is something else. That is definitely cool. But the cool thing with rendering though is like that first rendering that you make is terrible, right? But you make it and it's like, this is the coolest thing in the world. And then like the next one that you make that's better, it's like, now this is the coolest thing. Like I look back at like, even these renderings that we're talking about today, like I'll go back and I'm like, oh, these are not so great. Like I could have tweaked this, I could have tweaked that, but it's so cool that you can just like grow with it and always look back and say, oh, I should have done this better.
Yeah. I always think of, and I see other users run into this too, especially new users to rendering, is, hey, I brought my model in and I made it change a couple things, but like, man, I don't think it looks good. I've seen so many cool renderings. It's like, what do I need to do to make this look really cool?
Yeah, and honestly, that idea is definitely what prompts me to do like presentations like this, because it's so weird that your eyes your eyes and your brain like can pick up on things that you can't relate to. Like you can say that doesn't look right, but figuring out what doesn't look right is darn near impossible until you like train yourself to figure out like what you're looking for. So there's definitely that element of, we're really good at figuring out something is wrong, not so good at figuring out what exactly is wrong. So it definitely helps to, like, when you figure those things out, spread them around, because they're not necessarily intuitive things.
No, and I know the focal points, those types of things, I know are always, it's really a nice method of highlighting an area of a product. But yeah, it's like, maybe, I don't know if we're going to be talking about that today or not. Maybe we won't talk about renderings at all. It is April Fool's Day.
Yeah, we'll change the whole topic.
Oh, yeah, definitely not SolidWorks Visualize. We're doing PhotoWorks, right?
Yeah, PhotoWorks. That's what I was planning on showing. Did you want me to do something else?
No, PhotoWorks sounds great.
You know, it's funny. I haven't used, so obviously PhotoWorks and PhotoV360. I haven't used PhotoV360 except for like a tech support call since the moment I installed Visualize. It was just a clean cut. Like, sorry, you were great for what you were, but I'm with Visualize now.
Now it's time for Visualize.
Yeah, it was a pretty seamless transition.
Well, the first time I saw the SolidWorks Visualize technology was at, oh gosh, I don't remember what SolidWorks World it was before, but it was before we acquired the technology, and it was called Bunk Speed.
Yep.
And I remember, whoa, this stuff is really cool, and it was a big day when it became part of SolidWorks.
Yep. Yeah, absolutely. I was so excited too, because obviously using PhotoV360 at the time, but you're always like Googling around, like, what are my options? And seeing Bunk Speed out there. Was it Shot? Was that the name of the product? I'm trying to think back what the actual product name was. I think they had a couple, obviously, but
no, what I did, I still have it with me. I was debating. It's like, do I bring this or not? But I did at SolidWorks World. Well, 3D Experience World now, in the partner playground, you see all these different vendors and all these really cool technology, and they have cool giveaways. So I did. I still have my Bunk Speed toothpick holder.
Toothpick holder, yeah.
Yeah.
That's pretty cool. I'll have to search around. Maybe I can find one on eBay. That's a cool, cool
Well,
throwback
these
item.
are going up in price, I'm sure.
Yeah, everything's going
Anyway,
price.
all right, let's get the show started.
All right.
Welcome, everybody, to SolidWorks Live Design. I'm your host today, Michael Steeves. You may have seen me in one of these live design episodes before, but today, like you, I get to be a fool. Let's fool ourselves. Let's fool our eyes. We have a special guest today, someone who you may have seen before. And actually, I think if you saw 3D Experience World and the skit that we put on, it was part of General Session. You saw this guy doing a little bit of magic on screen and creating quite the debate regarding donuts. I don't know if we want to have a donut debate here today. I don't know if we're going to be rendering any donuts, but please let me introduce my teammate, Jesse Sprague. Welcome to the show, Jesse.
Thank you very much. Happy to be here.
Yeah, so like we were talking about beginning of the show, like our history in terms of rendering and creating 3D models and making them look amazing. Hopefully you'll be able to share some tips and tricks with us today. I'm excited to hopefully learn something because like if you've tried, any type of 3D rendering software, it may not be just the easiest thing, or you open up a 3D model and it looks amazing right away. That's not always the case. So hopefully, Jesse, you can teach not only me, but our audience some tips and tricks just to give our models that extra pop, whether if it's, we could talk maybe a little bit of when you would use a 3D rendering to begin with.
Yeah, those actually are great points, and they really tie into what I end up talking about a lot of times with Visualize. It's interesting with rendering, exactly what you just said. You end up talking about different things than you normally would if you were giving tips and tricks for another software, because like with CAD or with simulation, you kind of know generally what you're trying to do, right? And in that regard, you end up knowing what to look for. So you can go looking for a tool. I'm trying to make an extrude. I'm trying to make a revolve. You generally know what you're trying to do. With rendering, it's not always the case. And we were just kind of alluding to it earlier. Sometimes you pull something into Visualize, and I've had this conversation many times that, I tried Visualize, I opened it up, I rendered something, and it just didn't really look that good. So I gave up, or I moved on to some other solution. And that's usually the point where I get into some impromptu web meeting. Like, what are you talking about? You're doing something wrong. Let me see. Because there's just a few things to look for. But the odd thing with rendering is it's so different from everything else that we're doing in the engineering side of things. We're usually trying to manage our data or set up a simulation where we know we need loads and fixtures. With rendering, we see it looks wrong, but we don't know what to do to fix it. So hopefully in this session, we can kind of go through some things that I'm looking for when when I'm setting up renderings. And usually, Visualize looks complex, but it really isn't. So once you know what you're looking for, a couple of those items, you can find them very quickly and really get things going in short order. So hopefully we can cover some of those today.
Oh, that's great. We just asked the question in the chat of if you guys would share what your first render was. I know for me, it was a flashlight. Adding that lighting effect does amazing things. I think we'll be getting into some of that with Jesse today. But if you have any questions, comments, things you want to share, let us know. I think I already started my own debate of my own, if this is a toothpick holder or not. Anyway, it's some pretty cool swag to show off the legacy of the technology we're talking about today. So yeah, if you'd like, jump in the chat, let us know what you think, or as you have questions, put it in the chat. I will engage Jesse on your behalf. So please.
I have a liaison. I've never had a liaison before. This is nice.
A teapot. Bastian rendered a teapot. Oh, I think I remember doing a teapot before too. Yeah, there's all these like basic models that we can model up. So I think the other thing, you can see it behind me, is what's the name of this? This is from you, Jesse. What's it called?
The item, I don't know. It's just a sprocket of some kind. I based it on some image that I found somewhere, and I modeled something similar, and it kind of went from there. The whole project, actually, this project was really fun because this project was it was one of the competitions that we ran here that I entered prior to me working here. But this project in particular, I think was the first time that I tried to get like a full sort of collection, because it's really neat to do like singular renderings, right? You can get your CAD data in and you can make a cool rendering of it. But putting in a whole collection of things together on the same topic. So this was all of these images were for, some kind of mock presentation that I made up. That is really even more fun. And I think obviously most people who have met me know that I like Visualize because I tend to blabber on about it forever. But I usually surprise people with what I say is my favorite part about Visualize, and that is not that it makes like super high quality images, which it can, and obviously that's kind of what we're talking about today. But I actually like I think Visualize is like the perfect 80-20 tool. Like you can put 20% effort into something and you can get 80% result so fast. So like the baseline is good. And then from there, you can put in as much effort as you want to make it great. So like that's my favorite part about Visualize. You can really quickly, like you were talking about a screenshot earlier, right? Forget screenshots. Those are gone. You can just drop something into Visualize and literally within seconds, you can get something that looks way, way better and way more convincing. So in this project, I kind of like went along that line, like, okay, let's make a whole bunch of images that would all drop into a presentation. And this could be even just like, a middle of the road design presentation that you can use Visualize for to really amp things up and get people more in the zone of the design that you can get to so quickly. I've not used any other rendering tool that's as fast to get to a good result as Visualize. So I think that's my favorite part about it. And I kind of try to mimic that in this project. So this was a fun one. But the actual part, I don't know. It's some kind of Sprocket.
Oh, that's great. Yeah, and I think there's even a name on there. The chain wheels?
Yeah,
I mean, it looks like an aggressive design, and
yeah.
You did a really awesome job rendering it. So yeah, I think maybe we can get into that in a little bit here, start showing it off. I think that there's some questions here that you may be able to feed in some answers in terms of like some of the advanced export capabilities that we have with Visualize. And actually the different flavors of Visualize, because I guess maybe in the chat you guys can comment, give a little +1 if you're a SOLIDWORKS Visualize user, or a 2 if you're not a Visualize user and want to learn more. So let's how can people access SOLIDWORKS Visualize, Jesse?
Right, yeah, so Visualize is available a whole bunch of different ways, which is pretty cool. So you can, the way that most people get it would be through a SOLIDWORKS package. So SOLIDWORKS packages have Visualize built into them, and that would be like the static image version of it. A lot of people worry like, oh, okay, the package that I get, that comes along with one of the SOLIDWORKS bundles that I got is it something different than if I bought the Pro one? And the cool thing is, no, there's just extra functionality if you want to expand onto that. But you've got, the core tools that you would need to create a full rendering are there with that one that comes alongside of SOLIDWORKS. So if you have one of those, you can get it that way. You can also purchase Visualize Professional just on its own. So Visualize Professional then adds in a whole bunch of functionality on top of that. I have always said Visualize Professional, I think, is one of the best deals that we have in our product line, because you get so much in there that is so useful. You've got extra functionality just in terms of like getting a lot of things done, like configurations and things like that you can just set up one rendering, make a bunch of variants of it, and just send it out and let it go. But then you've also got tools that add on to your experience. So you have better control over your lighting. By adding in individual lighting, you've got animations, which is the main thing that people really like in Visualize Pro. So there are different bundles, standard and pro. And then, of course, with the 3D experience tools, we now have Visualize Connected, which is an amazing product because that includes a lot of the functionality that comes right alongside Pro, but that's built into that whole system. And then, of course, you've got the ability to connect that directly to the 3D experience platform. So that's been my go-to recommendation lately because it's just packed with functionality on that end. But yeah, those are kind of a rough overview of the options.
That's great. Yeah, Sam in the chat mentions the 80-20 rule that you just mentioned. Getting from 0 to 80 is easy. Getting from 80 to 100, that's where the danger lies.
Yeah, so I mean, with renderings like everything, right? The more time you put into something, the more you're going to get, and definitely the 80-20 rule applies to everything. It's the closer you want to get to 100, the more effort you're going to want to put in. But hopefully, though, with the presentation today, hopefully we can hit on some things that you can get at least into the 90s quicker.
Yeah, and the audience is coming through. We've got a good mix in the audience, so some SOLIDWORKS Visualize users as well as some people that don't use it now and want to learn more. So let's check it out.
Excellent. Excellent. Yeah. So again, my plan today was to just kind of, I have a handful of topics that we can kind of hit on, just sort of, pillars of things that I look at when I'm setting up renderings. And then we can just toggle back and forth. I have the software open too. We can toggle back and forth. Like I said, a lot of times the trouble doesn't come when you're looking to find the tool. It's just knowing what tool to look for. So hopefully we can hit that. And obviously I've got the software open so we can try to address where they are too.
Yeah.
But yeah, so I just have a couple images. This ended up on the splash screen for Visualize. So if you've been using it, you may have seen one of the images in there. And there's obviously Michael's got his scrolling images in the background. But kind of cool. I really enjoyed making this product that sort of, I had a wide variety of things that I could put in one place, which was unusual for me because I don't end up, actually using it for the projects that you guys in the audience would use it for. So that was a ton of fun. So the first thing that we'll talk about is detail. And this is probably the most obvious one that people think about when it comes time to set up your rendering. So you're in a spot where you go drop your model into Visualize and hit render and think, that doesn't look that great. That wasn't what I was expecting, right? There's a number of factors that all play into how the rendering comes out in the end. And model detail is an important one, but again, probably the one that people think about first. There's really two ways that you can go about addressing this. You can either build detail into the model itself. So right in SolidWorks or wherever you're building this model, you can build that detail in. Or in your rendering software in Visualize, you can build in surface detail and things like that with appearances. So if you look at this example that I created for this project, I actually use both. So in this area here, you can see there's kind of these little scale ups in here. That's actually modeled right into the model itself. I wanted a very specific pattern that I was going to have a hard time making. So there isn't a default kind of texture or something for that. It's all unique geometry. So because I wanted something very specific, I just built that right into the model. Now, of course, word of warning here, if you're building detail into the model, you will definitely want to be doing this in a separate sense. You probably don't want to be building in all this detail into your production models. So make a branch or make a configuration or do something, right? Pack and go, whatever your method is. I would definitely recommend doing that. And honestly, I would recommend doing that in general, because a lot of times I like to just play around and mess with things and not have to worry about, being linked directly to the production model.
Yeah, that's a really good point. I mean, I've seen so many times of design parts, they're used throughout the company. They go back to open it up another day and it's changed. It's like, what happened? And in like an uncontrolled environment. Eek.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. So that's where tools like, definitely some good data management practices come into play.
Yeah. And Michael, obviously on the simulation side, it's the exact same thing, right? You're always messing around. You're going the other way, usually in simulation, right? You're taking details out. I'm adding details in. But either way, you'd want to preserve that middle ground for whatever you're trying to keep there for the production model. So disclaimer there.
Well, a number of things come to mind because depending on the tool, they have different methods. I'm sure we'll get into the Visualize one in a second, but I know, like I've seen, you take that production model inside SolidWorks, and then you insert that into a new part.
Yep.
Right. So you have that associativity to the production model, but the changes that you're making don't go to the production model.
Yep. And you kind of put up a wall there. Yeah, whatever your method is, it's good to use one of those methods at least to kind of keep that separated. Just because I tend to do things that would be considered crazy for what the production model would be, right? You're building in detail because whatever you're seeing is what you're seeing. That's what you're rendering. So if you have everything simplified, it's gonna look simplified, right? So all the hardware has the actual threads on it and things like that. Makes a big difference in the rendering. Makes it a real pain when you're trying to work with a production model that doesn't need any of that stuff. So in this case, like I said, I did quite a bit of detail work in this, just in the model itself. You can actually see, if I zip in on this one a little bit, you can see I modeled in these little ridges just for convenience. They're off at a weird angle. If I was thinking they were going to be projected strangely. So I just modeled them in when I was right there. So I definitely take advantage of that. Again, I mentioned, modeling in the threads and things like that.
Yeah, so I can see those little step ups. You're saying those were created with SolidWorks features inside SolidWorks CAD, correct?
Yep. Right. Yep.
But I don't imagine you did the surface finish.
Exactly right. So that's your other option, right? So trying to model in this brush texture would be a nightmare, and obviously it's completely pointless because we don't need to do that. So that's your other option, is to, once you're in the Visualize software, you can make use of either a bump map or a displacement map, depending on what your goal is, to try to get that texture in there. And that works very nicely. If you've got something that you can just project on there, you can see in this case I have just a very subtle bump on this geometry here as well. It makes a huge difference because the real enemy of your rendering turning out at a believable state anyway is that a CAD geometry is just too perfect. Everything is too perfect, and nothing in the world at all is perfect. So really the game in setting up a rendering is trying to detune your model in a way that would make sense to our brain. That's really what we're doing, right? We're trying to add in all these little imperfections that we see with our eyes normally that we wouldn't obviously be modeling in. So that's really our goal, is calculated detuning.
Oh, that's good. I mean, yeah, I mean, we're trying to fool everybody. I mean, it's always interesting to see some of these challenges of like side-by-side images of, is it a real image or is it a rendering?
Yeah.
And some of the tricks that go into, what do you do to the perfect world to make it not perfect, imperfect?
I have one of those later, but it's unfortunately as a disclaimer, not as a show off.
Yeah.
But we'll get to that in a second.
All right.
So yes, so really two methods there. Obviously, for the modeling, most of the people on the call would probably know where to go to build in those features. But if we switch over to to our software here, I can show you real quick where you would add in something as far as the software side. One thing that I should mention too, because there is a little bit of crossover in this regard. A lot of people will model in fillets, and I still do too. All of the fillets in here are modeled in. But Visualize does have the capability to add in rounds, and it's actually been improved in recent years to great effect. I love the enhancement that they've made, because now it really applies at any point. And that little detail alone, surprisingly, adds a lot. And you can see in this model, I don't have nearly the edge rounds that I should have in there to really sell the effect.
So this is where, if my SOLIDWORKS model has sharp edges, I don't need to apply the fillets in that SOLIDWORKS model. Are we applying features in Visualize?
Oh, almost. So that's the beauty. You don't even really need the feature itself. We can actually look at that first. So if we look at, like in here, I'm just spotting that, like that area has some sharps on it that could really benefit from having a round on it. So let me back up. I guess the purpose of a round is that you'll catch light on those corners. If it's perfectly sharp, you can see here it goes from very bright to very dark with just that sharp cutoff. And somehow our eye can pick that up and say, that doesn't look right. Something about that looks weird. And you can see even on this one, this little nut here on the top, there are some small rounds on that. And you can see where the light is catching on every one of those, either with a dark or with a light highlight. You can see every one of those edges is catching, and it's pulling some light from whichever direction the light is coming from. It makes a big difference. Now, obviously, in a part like this, going through and adding in fillets in CAD is going to be one time. You're going to have to put some time into doing it. Obviously, we've got some selection methods that will improve that, but it's going to take you a little while, and it's going to be extra data that you're bringing in. So we can do that, again, as I mentioned, right in Visualize. The trick to this is you do it right at the part level. So I guess we're kind of diving into the weeds here quickly, but there are selection modes in Visualize that will allow you to control what it is you're actually picking on in the graphics area. So one of the best ways to speed up your workflow is just by using these. So you can select the overall model itself as it came in. You can select the individual components. Again, this is somewhat dependent on how you have imported these, but assuming you're using the defaults of automatic, you can set up groups, or you can pick by groups, or you can pick by appearance. So the way that I would attack something like this is just to use my filter, select on that component that I'm trying to make a change to, and you'll see that picks it up right in the tree for me. So I don't have to go hunting for it, just pulls it right up for me. And actually this advanced tab is open, which is where you would want to find this, and that's the quarter radius. So if we type something in here, like, I don't know the size of this, probably should have thought about this, but okay, I was close.
Oh, that's interesting. Yeah, we're getting some more people showing up. Hey, Chester, how's it going? Welcome to the show. Oh, and hey, Jesse, if you could toggle your camera on the call so we can maybe see you again. Yeah, so maybe we can break that down a little bit because we got some new users here. They may be familiar with SolidWorks, where like I see this thing on the right-hand side. It looks like a design tree, but it looks nothing like a SolidWorks design tree.
Yes. Yeah. So again, this is kind of dependent on how you've imported your model. This is definitely a point of confusion for some people when you're first getting started with this, because you would, to your point, you would expect, oh, this is just a tree. I'll see all of my parts in here. That is a real nuisance, really, when you're trying to render things, because you don't need to see everything. You just need to get access to what it is you need to get access to. So what Visualize does is it will actually filter things down for you, which works out really nicely. There's a number. So when you go to import geometry, you'll see a box pop up and it'll say what type do you want to use to import. I actually just recommend the defaults. The automatic mode works really well. It gives you control over being able to select the individual components, and then you can group things down the road if you want to do that. The other option that would be potentially helpful is if you wanted to use one that would combine all of the appearances into one. So that would be everything that's the same appearance will be treated as one part. So if you know you've got everything dialed in pretty well and you don't need to separate anything, bring that in, and then you could make a whole bunch of different color variations or colorways in like a second, right? You don't have to do any kind of tricks there. You can just swap everything out all in mass. So those are the two that I use with regularity.
That's great.
But again, I rarely will go searching around in here in the tree, because most of the time I'll just use the selection filters and grab everything right out of the graphics area. So the only time I really go hunting over here is when I need to, maybe move something around precisely with the scale or translate tools, or I'm going in, the advanced tab to add in quarter radius or something to that effect. Yep.
No, that's great. Okay, so what's next here in the design?
So I guess where I was going initially before we veered off onto this, which is a great tangent, because this is definitely good to know. Your fillets, you can do either place. I find it convenient now, especially in the newest versions of Visualize, to do right in Visualize, just add those. That does add quite a bit. But you will see here on the top face of this, we've got sort of that brushed appearance that we had on the other ring. So we can just use that. Now, again, if I want to access this quickly, I'll switch my selection filter right back over to appearance. So once I'm on the appearance selection filter, I can click right in the graphics area to whatever it is I'm looking at, and it will pull up this time the appearance instead of the part. So once I select this brings me right into all of the items that I would need to tweak to dial in this appearance. We don't obviously have time to get into the weeds of all of these sliders, and you'll see different options in here depending on what appearances you've used. But the thing that I do want to call out is the texture section. So you'll see that there's two tabs here alongside the general tab. So you've got the texture and then how it's being mapped. And here you go, you'll see that texture in there, that normal map that is giving me that brushed look without me having to go in and try to scrape the surface with some kind of modeling technique that would take an age, right? You just apply literally an image over top of it. And then once you apply that image, you can adjust the scaling and all of that. So those two methods are really what I use. I guess 2.5 methods are really what I use to get detail into the model. Build it right into the model like I did with the threads and with these scallops, or just apply it as an image, and then my rounds, I go one way or the other.
That's great. All right, Jesse. Oh, not to put on the pressure here, but Bastion has joined us.
Oh no.
Yeah, as Mike calls the man behind the magic and Visualize. So.
All right, I got to shape up.
Keep having fun.
All right, cool. So let's jump back here. Let me close this out, and let's jump back to what I was mentioning earlier, and that I have an example. You mentioned side by sides. One of the side by sides that I was working on with this lens, which turned out really cool. I just had a reference image that I found on the web somewhere, and
yeah,
I had found this model. I think it was on GradCAD that Hans had built. I didn't build the model. And I found the model. I was like, oh, this is cool. I'm into cameras. I'll just render this out. I had this convenient reference that I could sort of look side by side. And I spent quite a while, digging into the details of this one, just kind of like zooming in and trying to get the surface finish right, and adjusting where this very similar surface finish on a metal doesn't look the same as it does on plastic, and kind of tweaking those colors and things like that, kind of trying to get it dialed in. And at some point along the way, it went up, and some of the content that I made, I posted it somewhere, and I think Hans himself commented on it, and he said, very nicely, I'm paraphrasing here, but something along the effect of, looks very nice, but you spelled it wrong. And I said, what? I looked in. So here's my word of warning. If you get yourself into I stand by that details are important, but step back before you go posting things, because if you get too far in the details, you might miss that you put giant letters across the top that were wrong. So details are important, but the things before the details are also important. And somehow I had gone in and rewrapped some text, and I don't know, cleaned some things up, and was not paying attention, and got sumikyon instead of sumikron, which is just great.
That's awesome. So, I would almost cover up the words at the bottom there, and have that challenge of like, okay, what are the tells? You can put it in the chat of like what stands out to you, of how do you know it's rendered? What stands out to you? And it's like, nope, spelt wrong. There's no way that was an actual photograph. What else do you guys see? Put it in the chat.
That was not the thing that I was intending to be the giveaway, was me spelling the name of the product wrong. It happens to the best of us.
Like, you look at some of these areas, like the surface finish. I know it's like the lighting. Yeah. It's so good. But it's those little details that you look for. It's like, oh, that looks a little too perfect.
Too perfect, right? Yep. Yeah, those are the things. And honestly, on this one, the part that I suffered on was getting the metal right. I should have spent more time getting the metal to look a little bit closer with the lighting. And you can see there's more. You've got like an anisotropic effect here on the brushing of it that really spreads the light out more. So I missed those kind of things, but like we were saying earlier, when you look back on things, it's like, oh man, I totally missed that. That's the cool thing about rendering. You're always getting a little bit better and a little bit better.
Sam asks, does Visualize come with a spell checker?
I don't think it does, but we've got Bastion online. Maybe we can work that in.
Right.
It probably should, now that I'll be known as the guy who they had to put spell check into Visualize. That'll be my legacy. That's great.
I know so many tools. It's like I'll type it into a word processor and check it, and then copy paste it wherever it's going. Yeah,
I totally do that. Spelling has never been my strong suit. Remains to be my Achilles heel, apparently.
It's common for a lot of designers and engineers. It's like, no, we've got other things we need to be accurate and precise about.
Yeah, more important things to be worried about. In this case, the surface finish on the lens hood. Well, what are you gonna do?
Yeah. Bastion says the real one looks rendered to me, honestly, very confusing. It's like, wait, are you playing an April Fool's joke on us here?
Yeah. Come on. Maybe I have actually done that with this image. I've mislabeled them in presentations before to see if anybody would catch me, and I haven't got caught yet. So no. I guess that does tell you something. I'll flip them around and just see. So that's fun.
Hey, all Kristen, right, welcome to the show.
Get some more in the chat. Nice.
Yeah. Also great. Okay.
So again, detail, that's kind of one of the first pillar. Work your details in, a few handful of ways that you can do that. The next thing that I was thinking about is building in context. And this is one of the cool things. You were talking about earlier, Michael, about building in a light. It's like, wow, that's really cool, because now it's sort of like in context. There are some really quick ways that with Visualize you can build things in context, and this goes a long way into selling, the validity of something, right? When you see it in the environment that it's supposed to be in, you are already kind of like not on your guard anymore of looking for something that's wrong. It's a little more convincing. So this is definitely a big one, and fortunately it's one that's pretty easy to do. Again, you've got multiple methods of going about doing this. Let's talk about a few that I have up here. So this image on the left here, this one was one from that set from the project that we're talking about.
Yep.
And this one, I just reused a bunch of stuff that I already had in the model, right? So I have 3 different colors in there. So just copy them, move them around in the environment. But here you'll see that I just took some of the hardware that I already had modeled, and I just sort of scattered it on the floor. In this case, what I did was I took advantage of the physics that are in Visualize. So I just put a group of them here, and I just literally dropped them on the floor and let them just kind of naturally scatter. One of the things that is often difficult to get things looking natural is when you're manually placing things, right? When you're dragging things around and how does something fall on the floor? We never look at that, right? You don't pay attention to details of how things fall on the floor. So when you go to try to create something that looks like it fell on the floor, it's like suddenly you have like a mind fog about it. Like, how do these things actually sit to make them look realistic? With Visualize, you don't have to worry about it because you can literally drop them on the floor and say, that looks pretty good, or drop them on the floor again and sort of get that random aspect very quickly, which is definitely a cool technique.
Oh man, my simulation brain is going right now because it's like, wait, did you just say, like, I think of a kinematic study, right? And just like in SOLIDWORKS Motion, you can take a group of components, you can apply that contact condition so that they can come into contact and bounce off of each other. You can apply gravity, but that's not what you're talking about. We can do something similar in Visualize.
It's very similar. Yeah. I mean, it's not to the end result is a different goal, right? But the process is exactly the same. So you can tune it in and say, I want, maybe just the bounding box for these simple ones to be able to collide. So you can even detune just for performance reasons, or I want the actual mesh itself to be able to collide into this. So exactly like you would set up for motion studies, that same idea of contact and all of that, you can build that right in Visualize Professional. So you can just let those drop and they will actually contact the floor and scatter like that. It even has a mode in there that you can just like jiggle it, just shake things a little bit, just to add that. Right, we were talking earlier about you adding that imperfection. It goes a long way in selling the effect, but it's very hard to manually do that. So Visualize has some cool tricks up its sleeve that lets you create that sort of random feel without having to try to study references and things like that to how do I place these to make them look right so that it doesn't look out of place.
Yeah, I think Sean just mentioned, there's some questions on getting started. And something like that is definitely much more of an advanced feature. But if you're new to Visualize, there's an easy mode that we have and that you can easily toggle off when you're ready to get into some of these advanced things.
Yeah, and the easy mode is an interesting one. I go back and forth on recommending that one. I have a tendency to like to just jump in and dig through options, but even in the non-easy mode, the standard interface, it's laid out fairly well, right? So on the left-hand side, I can pull it up here, but on the left-hand side is your graphics area, but on the right-hand side, we were just sort of digging in there. There is a whole palette of all of your tools that you would need to reference. But they're organized pretty well. So they're all in columns. So if you look off to the palette there, you'll see that there are sort of tool bins for you across the top. So you can select this, and this will be where all of your geometry is. So if you're looking for anything that's related to the geometry, I mentioned that these filters are very helpful, but you can go straight to the source right on your right-hand side. So anything that you're looking for would be found in one of these bins. Essentially, you're working from here and working in here. So this is the end result that you're working on, and these are all the tools that you're using to make that happen. So geometry on the top, and then the next tab over is all of your appearances. Again, all you've got to do is select on an appearance, and then you're into the settings for that. What I would recommend there is literally just start tweaking things. If you have no idea what they do, obviously you can Google things, or you can get a hold of us or watch some of the videos that we've created. There's tons of content out there. But in the short term, just start twisting dials and see what happens. What are you gonna break? There's nothing to break in there. If it looks right, it is right. So turn it back to the way that it was, and if it looked better the way it was before you tuned it, and be on your way. So start tweaking things in there. And then the next one over in the middle is the scenes tab. So here's where you'll find all of your lighting information. I'll talk about environments in just a moment. So you'll find your lighting information in there. Your camera is the next one over. Again, camera we'll touch on if we don't run out of time here because I'm talking a lot already. So all of the cameras settings are in here, and you can add multiple cameras if you want. Tip while I'm here, I usually add a free camera. So just add a separate camera, and then I just lock the one that I'm using so that it's set in its view if I find a view that I like. And then you can just add a new camera. That's just a mobile one.
That's gotten me before. Like, I often found myself just making that error of making a change to the camera and like, oh wait, no, I need to go back exactly where I was.
Right.
Now it's too late. I can't like undo or anything.
Yep. You're all dialed in. Yeah.
Great tip.
Yep. That's what I usually do. And then I'll just, add a new one and just say free cam for the name. And then that one you can use to move around. All right. So that's my little pro tip there. And then the next one over from that is your libraries. So your libraries is where you'll find all of the assets that are included with Visualize. So you'll see that in this dropdown, you've got all of the goodies in here for things you can add. Most commonly, of course, you'll be in under appearances. This is where you'll find all of the appearances available. And don't forget that you can also toggle over into cloud. And cloud has more options in here. I actually don't have them all downloaded on this machine right now. So you'll see if you want to use one of these, you can hit the little down arrow, it'll download, and then you can use that. So there are even more options than what you just see natively. So there's tons of stuff in here that you can use. Obviously, from here, you've got appearances and models and backplates. Those are the ones here that you'll, appearances, plates, and environments that you'll be using most commonly. But yeah, all of the good stuff is right over on your right-hand side. And like I said, my recommendation would be to not be afraid of it. It's a totally separate file. Once you get it in here, it's just graphics data. There's really nothing you can ruin. Just delete it if you don't like it and just go in there and start twisting knobs. I mean, that's literally what I did to learn in PhotoView 360 and carried over into Visualize. I had no experience before that. It's literally just twisting knobs and watching videos to see what other people are doing. And you can get on your way pretty quickly.
Well, yeah,
there is a training course too. I should mention there is a training course, so you can contact your reseller.
Yep.
I think this product, I've made my own training courses for this before. I think this product probably more than any of them, you can take a course and be dangerous like immediately. So I definitely, it's something to look into. Within a couple of days of training, you can have all of that groundwork to get a real jump start. So
yeah, that's great. And I'm just reflecting from our conversation earlier about trying things, kind of break it and make it work, kind of thing. Because using Visualize, you've eliminated that risk of that breaking a production model. You can bring in that production model, make as many changes as you want inside Visualize. There's a disconnection back, so the changes that you're making don't go back to that production model. That's exactly great. Right.
And to that end too, it is a standalone installation, so you can have somebody else working on it. If you want somebody to take a look at it, it's a separate install. So there's that too. It's not even connected to your CAD system, so it's a standalone unit. Now that has come as a point of criticism from some people. I don't agree with it at all, because in SolidWorks they have an add-in for it that you can just push yourself right to SolidWorks. I have heard some people say, well, I really liked in PhotoView that it was built in, and I guess I did sort of too, but I never once have considered that a downside, that it's a standalone. I've only seen it as a benefit, but that's just my opinion.
Yeah, but as long as we have that associativity, because if you make a change to the SolidWorks model, what happens in Visualize?
Yeah, that's a great point. I haven't even mentioned that. So we do have monitor file in Visualize that allows you to do that update. So your option is to leave it, if it's a change that you don't want to include. Sometimes they're changing things for other purposes that, you have the final copy of what it's going to visually look like. So you have the option to have it linked or not. So you can update down the road, which is cool. Really cool.
Great. Yep. So yeah, that context was a great point. I mean, I think I've been able to get into Visualize a little bit, especially over the years. But having that cloud library, I think that's where I found a lot of those resources to come in handy a lot.
Yeah, for sure. And the cool thing is with rendering, and obviously we're talking about Visualize, it's pretty neutral. I mean, once you get to this point, you can bring in data from anywhere. You've got images, you have HDR environments, which we'll talk about in a moment, but all of that stuff is common pretty much across the industry. So with this being a tool that works with CAD data, you've already got a huge advantage over just other rendering tools that are more artistic tools, right? So because you can bring in CAD data, you can bring in CAD from anywhere. You can go, pull. Obviously, you want to make sure you have rights to use it if you're going to use it in some publication or something like that. Sure. But physically, you can get stuff in from pretty much anywhere, which is awesome. And Visualize, you can pull it in, and it's almost always something that you can make use of, which is great. In fact, the next thing that I had on this list, something like this, in this image, the drone itself is a model that I made in 3D Experience and in SolidWorks in combination. The landing pad that it's on is just a disk that I made in SolidWorks. The landing pad texture I made in Photoshop, so I made that custom. But the rock that it's sitting on was a rock that I just purchased online. I think it was an OBJ file or something from Turbo Squid or somewhere where you can purchase data. I think it was like $6. Drop that into Visualize, and again, you're almost instantaneously building that context that makes it a whole lot more believable than it just sitting on its shadow on a white plane or something like that. So because you have that flexibility in Visualize with what you can bring in, it can be data from all over the place, and you can sort of assemble it all in one point to make whatever it is you're trying to make with ease.
Oh, that's great. Mohammed says his first rendering was a gearbox. So many good gearboxes out there you can render.
Yeah, and that'd be a cool one to do if you're using Visualize Pro or Connected. Bring all the animation keyframes right over from SolidWorks into Visualize. Kick it off.
That's one thing I know that you have from this project. The chain wheels project is an animation, like an explode process. Those are some of the coolest things I think that we can create out of Visualize.
For sure. Yeah. How are we doing on time? Should we skip around a little bit? I know
we're good. We're good. Yeah. I mean, if we want to hit like one or two more things that you want to chat about, then we can start wrapping up the show.
Sounds great. All right. So one last thing on context. Maybe I'll just stay on my examples here, and we can go through these a little more quickly. In a case like this, this is a case where I just use a background image. It's called a backplate in Visualize. This is literally a drag and drop operation. So these are obviously the model. The background is just a picture that I found on, on a stock website. You pull it in, and I mean, that is literally instantaneous drag and drop. You're building in context. So backplates are a really great way to add in some context. In this case, there was nothing here. This is all modeled. This is just a texture on an image and then some SolidWorks models around it. So there are a bunch of different ways to go, but I guess the benefit there is that you have all of those different options, right? Any one of those ways is a great way to build
It's
context.
definitely to tell how not to be fooled when it's a rendering is you look at the back plate, but then you look at the reflections on the model and you're like, but it's in a kitchen.
Right. Right. Yep. So
it's
definitely
always in that kitchen, isn't it? Like what? How? You gotta be mindful of those reflections.
Yeah, definitely. Environment would be one of the things that you would want to do. So let's skip over to that real quick since we're on that theme. So the environment was the middle tab that I clicked on when we were in the software. And what the environment is in Visualize is a combination of two things. It's just an HDR image, which is a spherically wrapped image that generally has more light data in it than a normal image would. That's just a drag and drop. You can find those. Obviously there's a library of them in Visualize, but you can also find them on the web available. And then you have the backplate itself. That is the background image, which you can just use the environment, or you can swap it out. And then if you're using, professional or connected or anything like that, you can also augment with additional lights if you want to do that too. But I will say, and I have said, that the environment is arguably the most important thing to try to get close to what you want. For one, what you just said is a huge tell, right? You've got it sitting in a parking lot and then there's a toaster reflected in the side of it. That's pretty obvious that that's not, something's wrong there, right? But also just for lighting. This example that I had at the top is one that I like to show because it's the exact same Visualize project with just a different HDR on it. Right, so both of these renderings are identical. The only difference is I put a different HDR on it, and it's night and day. So a lot of times when people call in and say, I tried it and I couldn't really get it to look good, this is the first place that I look. Well, what was your lighting doing? It probably didn't look good because it's in an environment that didn't match what you had in your head. It's just like simulation. Like we said before, it's literally light simulation. So if you're, in simulation, if you're not setting up your loads and restraints in a realistic way compared to what you're doing in real life, then it's not going to turn out with any kind of results that match what you would expect. Rendering it is exactly the same way. So this is correct, and this is also correct. They're just totally different environments.
You could almost put that real and rendered underneath each to like, no, my rendering is
right. Yeah, real.
Good April Fool's joke. They're there.
Rendered. Yeah.
Nope,
sure.
they're both renders.
Yep. Yeah, but it's a stark difference, right? For changing one thing, it's a massive difference. You only change one setting in there essentially. So that is definitely a good place to go. If that's what you're struggling with and something doesn't look realistic, try using different HDRs, and even go on the web and download some and pull them in, because the detail in the light does make a big difference, right? So to your point, I had just a couple examples of matching the lighting to what you're trying to go with.
Yes, yeah.
Right. If you're looking for a studio shot, then a studio environment would be more appropriate. Maybe something with top lighting or something like that. But if you're trying to match it into a backplate, like this example was, not one of my best renderings, I don't think. But my point here is that the coloring of the lighting and things like that, you would want to try to match. So reflections, but also the color of it. So try to find an HDR that's a similar time of day or something like that to match things up and try to get them synced up. One other thing that I'll mention while we're right here is pay attention, if you're using a backplate, to where the light is coming from. Right, so the light is coming from here. So what you would want to do is rotate your environment so that your shadow is sort of in line with that. I think I actually missed, because I think it should probably be going somewhere over here. But my point is try to get it at least close, because that's another dead giveaway when your shadow's going the wrong way and then you've got a picture in the background that your light is clearly coming from somewhere else or supposed to be coming from somewhere else.
No, and I think Mike Sandy did this with the Nemo submarine in the recent SolidWorks What's New.
Exactly.
Because we added an enhancement in Visualize about what can you expand on that? The tool that we have now for like lining up the shadows?
Yes. So there was two enhancements built into that one that you're referring to. So if you're using a backplate, you've got now a tool that will help you sync up and line your camera up with the actual perspective of the image. So in that one, the Nemo was sitting on like a deck, right? And a deck of a boat. So Mike used that match camera to match the perspective that the background image is at. That's a great tip in itself. But also in that image, the shadow was coming across and it was kind of like bleeding through the wall, right? Because it should go up on the wall, but it's just a picture in the background. How would Visualize know any different, right? So now we have the addition of the shadow catcher, where we can place some geometry there and say, okay, the shadow has to actually land on this as if there's actual geometry there, even though there isn't. So a couple of neat enhancements in that demo that you're talking about there.
Yeah. Yeah. So interesting. And I think we can go back. They're posted on YouTube.
Yep.
That we can go back and watch. That's great.
There's a bunch of good stuff in that one. That's worth a rewatch as well. The renderings in that turned out really cool. Mike did a great job on those.
All right, so I'm looking for some misspellings again in that lens right there. What do we want to mention about that one?
Yeah, so I fixed it by then. So what I was going to say in this case is that don't forget. It's easy to forget that the environment includes your floor. So sometimes we set something down and we think, oh, there's a shadow there. That's good enough. It may be good enough, but there are things that you can do to maybe tune things up a little bit. So in this case, I have an actual physical floor in there. So I added a plane right in Visualize. You can add geometry in there. I added a plane and I added an appearance to that. So you can see here, the reflection kind of gets broken up and the shadows kind of get broken up with the texture that's actually there. Right? So the bump map of the floor is now interacting with the light that's coming down off of the model itself. You can actually see that this is a physical floor because you can see the light that I used off in the distance, and you can see where that reflection kind of breaks up on the floor, and then this is the end of the table, so to speak, and then the rest of the light is there. So that's an option that you have available to you. Put a physical floor down, and then just now you've got free reign to use any materials that you want to use on that. But Visualize also has built in the ability to just add a reflection as well. So you don't have to use a shadow. So right in the scene settings, you can dial that up, and you can control roughness and all of that. So in this type of example, I wanted a little more like glossy floor look. And I would recommend probably not using like a full mirror floor, but try to haze it out a little bit, because nothing is ever like perfectly sharp. It doesn't have to go this far, but that's an option that's available as well. So that can be a nice effect too.
It's so cool to look like all the intricate details on the different parts.
Yeah, it's definitely cool with a complex model, because you can kind of see like the reflection is really neat with the more complex the model is. I don't think I've actually ever used this model for anything. This was the chassis that I built for my RC drift car Actually, Rob Parsons had his hand-controlled drift car in the partner pavilion, I think it was called at that time.
Mm.
Um, and I built an RC replica of his car for World that year. And when I was putting the chassis together, I just measured up and modeled everything in SolidWorks while I was going. And actually, Michael, I wonder, these might be the struts that I used for the Making Spring video that you referenced with World
Oh,
the other year.
oh
I
my
think
gosh,
they
it
might
totally
be.
is.
I
Yep.
think they
Yeah.
might. I
Oh
think
man,
that's
that
the
takes me back at when
yeah.
about spring fever and how to
Yep.
make
Yep. Flexible
springs and have them
components.
animate.
Yep. Flexible components. I think that's probably the only thing that I've done with this model, and it's funny that you picked that up full circle.
Yeah,
Full
that's
circle,
great.
Michael.
Let's see. John asked in the chat. Oh, by the way, is there a preferred graphics card for rendering?
Preferred
Maybe we
graphics
can
card.
talk
Okay.
about the hardware necessary for producing some of this.
Yeah, so we didn't really touch on that yet. So that's another benefit actually of Visualize, because Visualize you can go you can make use of whatever you have, which is nice. Visualize can run on your CPU, it can run on your GPU, your graphics card, or it can run on a combination. So generally on something like a laptop, you might be better off running with your graphics card and your CPU sort of in tandem, because it can, teamwork on that and crunch through things a lot faster. With PhotoView 360, we were stuck with CPU. So immediately that jump to Visualize feels so much faster because now you've suddenly got more resources to work with. If you have a really, really fast graphics card, you may be better off just going graphics only and just running GPU and just letting your graphics card run with it. So what I would say is the best thing you can do is if you, whatever your hardware is, just run a couple tests, run a few different scenes and run it with CPU, run it with hybrid, and run it with GPU. It's almost assuredly not going to be fastest with CPU unless you've got some crazy setup. But I would at least try hybrid and GPU to see which is fastest, and then run with that, whatever your specs are. As far as actual cards, that's tough to say because there are tons of cards out there that could work really well. Obviously, Visualize works very well with the NVIDIA setups, but has also been expanding out as well. So you've gotten additional options for what you can pick up in terms of graphics cards. But yeah, I mean, it will certainly take advantage of a Screaming card. If you go get a card, it will take advantage of it. NVIDIA uses the CUDA technology. Even better, it takes advantage of multiple cards. So if you've got money burning a hole in your pocket, I mean, it's impossible to find. It's impossible to find graphics cards right now because I've been looking for one myself. But if you can find a couple that work well for you, the Quadro cards or the RTXs seem to be a little bit easier to get a hold of. But yeah, if you've got some money burning a hole in your pocket, you can take advantage of multiples, and you'll see obviously some serious gains. I think the first couple is literally like double the speed, and it tapers off in efficiency a little bit after that. But yeah, you can build a really impressive.
Oh, let's go. We've got some good conversation going on in the chat here. Thanks, Mike, for your help. But yeah, there's a blog out there with some published GPU benchmarks.
Yeah.
Yeah, there's some good chants about the benchmark architecture.
Yeah, that's a really good one.
That's great. Well, this has been awesome. I'm glad we kind of started off with we got some tips sprinkled through, talked about some of the hardware that can be used or leveraged to really speed up the process for rendering. I think we'll start wrapping up here, Jesse. So thanks for coming on the show. Is there anything else that you want to mention before we say goodbye to you?
Let's see. Anything else? Well, it's April Fool. Actually, Michael, you and I, we've been working on a new demo that's coming up for Lid Boss. People have seen that product at World that got highlighted. We have some renderings from that. I have, since this works out well, it's April Fool's Day, I've buried some Easter eggs in the renderings for those. So maybe if people can keep their eye out for that, I think the demo will be coming out within the next month or so. So keep your eye out for the Lid demo, and I might need to leak some higher res ones. I don't know if they'll be super visible, but there's a few references in there. So
all right, well,
maybe we'll have to do another. Yeah, we'll have to do another recap episode of this somewhere down the road and see if everybody caught them all.
Oh, that's great. All right, Jesse, thanks for coming on, sharing your expertise with SOLIDWORKS Visualize. I'm sure we'll see you again here on Live Design in the future. So I guess, yeah, for everyone in the chat, give Jesse a round of applause. Thanks again, Jesse, for sharing your knowledge.
Absolutely.
I just wanted to share a couple things. For next week, we will not be having SOLIDWORKS Live or Live Design, but on the following week, we've got two really exciting episodes on Wednesday, April 13th, we have BattleBots. And it's kind of a mashup between SOLIDWORKS Live and a user group summit. So we're going to see Witch Doctor and Hypershock on the program, learn how those successful teams got into BattleBots, how they design and test their bots, and of course, watching the carnage unfold live. So bring your questions, bring some popcorn for this primetime episode on Wednesday, April 13th, BattleBots and the Swugin on location in Miami. So look forward to that. And then on April 15th, we have Kirby Downing coming on live design at how he made his own personal soundboard. Sounds interesting. So good. Make sure you tune back in for that. Otherwise, thanks everyone for joining SOLIDWORKS Live Design. It's great to have you engaged in the chat. And actually, I did want to mention, Jesse's, where else can you see that Sprocket? You would see it on the splash screen for SOLIDWORKS Visualize. I guess if you wanted to show off your model, try to get a chance in the splash screen, you can go to solidworks.com/story/share-your-story. So if you want to share your models, share those images, maybe get a chance to get on the splash screen for our SOLIDWORKS products. It's definitely a good way to do it. And also showcase your talents in the industry. So thanks everyone for attending. And for now, I'm Michael Steeves. We'll see you in the next episode.